Hi.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. All right. Welcome to How to Rob a Bank or Do Armed Robbery by Short Bus Debate Club. I'm Brian Courtney. That's Darren Jolly.
This is a literary narrative episode. It's not meant to be taken literally.
Yeah, this is movies and or books that have to do with, or I guess just media in general, because one of the things that I wanted to talk about that just fucking makes me laugh, and I can't remember if I read it in the newspaper or saw it like on a news clip somewhere, but some dildo goes in to rob a bank, but before he goes to like the convenience store right next door to the bank, and he gets whipped cream and fucking sprays it all over his head and face. And he goes in and robs the bank. Well, he waits in line. So by the time he gets up to the teller, all of the shit is melted off of his face, and they can clearly identify him. That and the other one, which I know I read about, was somebody went in and robbed a convenience store while it was snowing. And then just walked right back home. So the cops showed up and just followed his fucking tracks to his house. So, yeah, media, newspaper, books, whatever.
So 100 years ago, when I was a child, some people that I grew up with, this girl's boyfriend stole a car, and he ditched it at Swedish. And
medical center.
Yes, that's where I was born, incidentally. And they went back and they grabbed the car one night. My friend, and then her buddy, whose boyfriend had stolen the car, and these two other guys, and they totally fucking decided to go joyride with a car that had been, on the fucking books as being stolen for a little over a week. And incidentally, it was snowing outside, and they got over to my friend's house, my other friend's house, and they ditched the car in front of her house, and they ran all over the place, but they ended up running back right into her house, and they were able to find all the motherfuckers in the same way that I'm sure that super genius bank robber was located, where the snow takes them right back to where it is that you go and hide.
Yeah, don't do that. So I guess this really is kind of how to rob a bank or how to rob a convenience store.
Did the whipped cream person, did they have a cherry on top?
Maybe, from where the cops pistol whipped him and he fucking started bleeding.
Still metaphor and all that wonderful stuff.
Yes. So we were going to talk about movies. I beat this to death, but we kind of talked about it at the end of the last class, where Jim Thompson wrote a bunch of books, and I know of at least two of them that they made into movies.
The Killer Inside.
The Killer Inside Me, and or The Killer in, is it? I thought it was Me.
I think it's just The Killer Inside. Go ahead, keep talking. I'll figure that out.
And The Getaway. So
he wrote The Getaway?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever fucking realized that.
So The Getaway.
That's like your favorite fucking stupid movie ever.
Dude, it's fucking awesome. And I've seen both versions. I could have been.
You're right. It's me.
It is me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so The Killer Inside Me. And he wrote a bunch of other crime. Maybe you could even consider it, I don't know, noir type of literature.
Yeah, it's some dark ass shit, dude.
But The Getaway, I may be biased because I saw the remake first, and I've grown up, with video games being violent and movies and everything else. So when I saw the original, it wasn't as good to me. Like, there wasn't dirty language. They didn't say fuck or shit nearly as much as they should have. Because I'm figuring if you're fucking robbing banks and being chased by the police, well, and it wasn't a bank that they robbed, it was a racetrack. But she helped bust him out of jail by fucking this one guy who had some juice. So they busted him out of a Mexican jail so that he could rob this racetrack. That's the movie version. The book is quite a bit different, and that's usually the case. But as far as I'm concerned, the remake is better, but that's only because of gratuitous violence and language.
You want to hear something else weird about that? There was a version of The Killer Inside Me that was made in 1976 too.
Really?
It was, I didn't know it until we were just talking about it. It was located in Montana instead of in Texas, but it's Lou Ford. It's the same, protagonist, antagonist. I don't know. He's kind of both at the same time. I mean, he's a fucking weird evil
Yeah, he was
motherfucker.
a weird, like, schizo dude. Like, he thought he was the sheriff and that he was doing good things, but then if anybody fucked with him, he killed them.
And the way that Thompson, when he wrote that, was like, it's hard to kind of like sometimes the tracks of like when he's moving back and forth between his head spaces. It's like it's hard to tell sometimes. Thompson did a really good job of writing it, but there's no doubt like one of the points that Thompson was making was how difficult it was for the Ford character to connect to reality when these sort of like divisive sort of like mental spaces would sort of like flip back and forth. I haven't read that since I was in an undergraduate, like '02 or something.
Well, so I have read, I want to say 3 of his books, and everything that I've read I liked. But I gave it to my uncle because my uncle liked The Getaway too, and he said I hated that shit. Now that might have been because of a similar reason where he's used to the movie. Of course, he saw the original first, but I mean, he's used to the movie, so then the book is entirely different. Like, they ended up, I can't remember, it was like in a fucking sewage tunnel
Oh,
for
you
like
gave
a
him a copy of The
week.
Getaway, you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I let him read
Borrow.
my
Yeah, yeah.
copy. Yeah.
And he said that sucks.
Yeah, he didn't
Well,
like it
dude,
at all.
Thompson was. I mean, he was pretty avant-garde for his time period. I mean, and he was like, I mean, he was just thought of as like a one of them throwaway paperback,
Yeah, like a dime
writers.
novel
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
guy.
But I mean, and nobody knew. It's kind of like trying to think about like Towns Van Zandt. Like nobody knew what kind of a singer songwriter he was until after he basically buried himself by drinking and doing drugs. And Thompson, I think, was probably similar in that respect. And his genius wouldn't have been the same if he was. I think it's kind of tragic and cool, in a stupid romantic kind of way.
Well, and what they did in the movie, so you talked about the dude in France. By the way, I know Monte Carlo is in Monaco, not France. It's an entirely different country. I don't know why fucking Monte Carlo popped out of my mouth in the last episode, but
But see, that's he fixed it. That's what MSNBC should try to do every now and again when they fuck up with their comments.
so
Next
you
time,
were
if you want to
talking
fucking
about the
say that, Betty
guy
Masson. Sorry.
in the fucking tunnels, and he's doing all of this shit, and they're bringing oxygen in so that
Yeah.
they can breathe, and they end up fucking cutting into the vault,
Mm-hmm.
stealing all the safety deposit boxes. In The Getaway, the one I like, the remake, they actually do some really fucking cool shit in order to rob this racetrack. I mean, they're blowing up shit and they've got a fucking fake fire truck and all kinds of stuff. So it was similar to The Town. Now, both of these movies have nothing to do with bank robbery, but they do have to do with armed robbery and people getting shot. And The Town was fucking badass too.
Yeah.
You don't like The Town?
I think it's okay. I mean, I just think. Talk about it for a second, then I'll give you some shit about why I don't like The Town. It just seems hokey.
Well, it is a little
I
bit.
like Jeremy Renner's character. Like is that Renner?
Renner, yeah. It is a little bit hokey. I mean, because they always have to put this love interest in there. And
yeah, what the fuck is the movie about?
Literally, you're asking me what it's about or what it should be about?
I don't want to know him to comment. I want like what was Ben Affleck trying to accomplish when he made the movie? What was it about? I mean, like you said, the love interest thing. I mean, that's like a plot mover.
It's it's that formulaic fucking Hollywood bullshit. I mean, but the town. So I mean, they throw those stats up at the beginning of the movie where.
Did you look into any of that stuff though?
It's true. I mean, they did
to an extent.
Right. True. They did. There are a lot of fucking armed robberies in Massachusetts as a whole, and that's probably just because that's where most of the people are. But in that area,
Charlestown, yes.
So I think he was just trying to come up with something because he did that other fucking movie. What is it? We Own the Night? No. Where it was a 1920s gangster.
I don't know. I didn't know that. I mean, I know he's done. He did the one about them escaping those R.O.L.L, the one from there. I don't know.
Something about
gangster.
1930s gangster. I think it was something Night.
Well, keep talking about.
Anyway, so the town, these guys are robbing armed security cars.
They're doing two things though. In the movie, they only rob the cars. But
no, he ends up robbing fucking the stadium.
The Boston.
But that's only because of the fucking kingpin mafioso florist guy.
Florist, yeah. Remember who cut your balls?
Because they generally, their crew was set up to do armed robbery to security trucks after they've done pickups. So they did a really good job. They did all their reconnaissance. They watched all of these people. Ben Affleck his character was supposed to be smart about things, and he said, no, we can't do it because this guy is, a fucking vet right out of fucking Afghanistan, and he's trigger happy, and he's just waiting for a fight. So we're gonna move on or wait.
But Renner's got a fucking death wish.
Right. And he also likes money, I'm guessing.
Hollywood Land? Is that the?
No.
I can't. Okay.
So I thought it was a good movie, but I like these types of movies. I wish they didn't do the shit because I understand people fall in love. It happens. Bonnie and Clyde. She fell in love with Clyde, and Clyde fell in love with her.
Before you get too far away, I want to dog on that movie a little bit, though.
Well, no, I was going to circle back to the town, but what I was going to say is I understand that people fall in love, and that kind of shit happens, but you don't have to throw it into every fucking movie just so you're drawing a certain demographic. Like, now more women are going to like that movie because Ben Affleck fell in love with the woman, or now more guys are going to like it because Ben Affleck got laid a couple of times. It's fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's very irritating. I mean, and ultimately, like, you take somebody like Scorsese, right? And he does things in a very specific way. Like, he wants to look at the dark underbelly of things. And I guess that's what brings people in. And maybe Ben Affleck uses different, effective strategies to bring people into a film to get it to relate to them, like you said, to draw on a specific demographic. And look, I'm being hard on the town. I don't hate the movie. I like the Fergie character when he talks to him about how how you deal with your geldings. I did your mom the chemical way. I gave her a taste and doped her up, good, and then she hung herself with a hanger.
Live by Night is the name of the movie.
Okay, right there, I got it. Okay, I never even seen that. Got no idea about that one. But either way, because characters generally like save a movie for me. The FBI agent was an idiot in it. Look at John Hamm, the one that played it. I mean, he was just a very typical He would make stupid FBI comments like, what did I see here? Um, this is the no fucking around crew, and we're gonna turn this around both ways. I mean, and they the fact that they used that Dino guy, Dino the Dago, right? I like that because the fact that they drew somebody in from there. The only reason why he got that job there was because he was tied into the community. He was like a paid, what do you call CI, a paid confidential informant who
Right.
worked for the FBI. But having said that, it just was like that. The love side of it was hokey. The his relationship to Renner was hokey. Like it just wasn't really like the characters did not really go very well. Like they make a big deal about his dad, but his dad doesn't really even. He has the two you need to get over your mom fucking killing herself, and it's the only real communication that he has with her. It just didn't. If you're gonna go into the dark side of that world, it just seems like they could have done a better job. So that's all.
Well, absolutely. I think that most movies could do a better job, but it's easy for us to say that shit when we're sitting here in the fucking.
I don't give a shit. I'm gonna talk shit about
No, I will talk all kinds of shit about all
it.
kinds of stuff. If I see something wrong, I'm gonna point it out. But I'm just saying, that it's easy for somebody to say, well, you should have done this or you could have done that. Why didn't you do this instead of that? And like, okay, so I've said it before, like when I wrote the book, one of the reasons that I self published was because there were so many other authors that had talked shit about publishing houses taking away their fucking what they were saying. Like one lady wasn't allowed to say ass and they changed it to this. You couldn't say damn, let alone goddamn. Um so when you're making a movie and you've got this huge budget, and this isn't even a huge budget as far as movies are concerned, but let's say it's $15 million. Well, the executive producers are going to want to have a say in what is done and what isn't. And maybe they threw the girlfriend in because in real life, she was fucking one of the executive producers and they wanted her to have a spot. Maybe the guys at whatever production house did it, what Warner Brothers wanted it there because again it draws in this other demographic. It doesn't make it so hard and gritty, and it gives everybody that fucking stupid rose colored glass thing that we all need in the US.
And I'm pretty sure, yeah, Ben Affleck isn't putting up all the money for his movies, so he's gonna have to play by somebody else's rules to some extent. It was the $37 million budget for the film. I mean, there wasn't a lot of technical stuff in it.
Well, no, and I
And
didn't know. I was just throwing the 15 million out there
yeah,
as an example because I mean, even if it's only 15 million, you've got to answer to somebody.
unless you're the person that's or you and the people that you're putting in that circle are directly.
Right, which is weird because he probably could have put up the fucking 37 million by himself. He could have asked his buddy Matt Damon to help him out.
So they're putting a movie out called Air this year, right? That they produced and Affleck directed, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the funding came from for both of them. But I don't know that for sure. I should probably not say that unless I know a little bit more. But having said that, yeah, I mean it's a bank robbery movie, and the Amorita kind of like way that I like. I mean, the fact that they have commitment to each other, I really think it's funny how much. So I was watching Reservoir Dogs, right, and they're talking about this. It's when Tim Roth's character, Mr. Orange, goes and he's talking to the other cop who knows that he's undercover, and they're doing um, they're trying to get ready for what it is that
they're rehearsing his.
It's right before the rehearsal. Okay. But he's sort of like he talks about how that guy Long Beach might put him into contact with.
Okay, so it was at the diner when he was talking
right, yeah.
about all of this shit, and he's like, "I got him. I got that motherfucker. Yeah, he's on the hook."
So one thing that they always do in these movies where they talk about the person that that rats on people and rolls over on people. I always think it's funny that cops, because they have their own kind of a muerta in a certain sense too.
The
Yeah,
blue
yeah,
line.
yeah. But so they try to pull narcs in all the time, but they hate fucking narcs. Every time they talk about a CI, they always, this guy's a scumbag, that guy's a scumbag. I just think it's fucking hilarious that in a lot of senses, the way that the criminal's mentality is formulated is almost like the mirror that sits between them and the law enforcement is almost exactly the same.
Dude, they are the same.
Yeah.
The only difference is one of them's got a badge. That's why I was saying that for a while I thought, in the old West, it was harder to tell the good guys from the bad. And then I thought about it and I was like, no, it's not any fucking different. I mean, they take bribes, they fucking shoot people, they beat people up. And who knows? Maybe they do fucking rob banks. I know for sure that they rob drug dealers.
Yeah, that's that one with that Boston one that I had you. I can't remember what the name of it was, but John Voight's the dad, um, and Clive. It's not Clive, but whatever. Um, it's all about these dirty Boston police officers that are robbing fucking drug dealers all over the place and paying people off. And
Is that the city? Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of understand what you're saying, but cops, they don't hate it when somebody goes undercover and rats on, the other people, because at that point they're doing their job. But if anybody ever tries to take anything to internal affairs, they get all fucking, hurt. Um, yeah, it's there's definitely
I just think it's
a
odd.
certain amount of hypocrisy there.
And they're exactly. Pride and Glory was the name of the film. So, but and it was actually a pretty good film, complicated to be sure, and interesting. But I think that it's just hilarious and that's a stereotype. They do it over and over again. Every time you talk about an arc, I mean, they use them, but they don't think anything is nice about that guy. He ratted on all of his friends. Well, how are you fucking succeeding at what you're doing unless you're doing, I don't want to get into
Right.
like I believe in protecting the people that you get involved with in life, no matter what. That's your family. So I believe in the more concepts as well. I don't really do anything that would make me to be subject to get in trouble, except for opening my mouth the vast majority of times. So
I don't think what I believe I would ever call omerta, and it's not because I wouldn't die for my beliefs or in order to protect people that were around me. It's because I don't know. I I don't know quite how to explain it, but originally when the Sicilian mob came up with the omerta concept, they were saying, we are above everything else, and you would die rather than hurt us. And now, and this is partially because of the feds and everything that they've racked up against them with the RICO predicates and minimum mandatory sentencing and all of that stuff. But now those guys are ratting each other off left and right.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know personally that I want to call it that, just because I don't want to be associated with that concept because of the fact that it's essentially dead. Like, O Muerta is Muerta.
You are a total fucking douchebag. So whatever.
But I would call it, fucking honor, respect, any number of fucking words.
I'm not ready to let go of it quite yet. I understand the point that you're making, but because I think it goes beyond that. Because I do think that when you maintain a commitment to something that you, when you relate to other people, particularly when you live in a world where like I mean, in the context of the Sicilian mob, they were fighting against tyranny. I mean, where it began, it just turned into a really horrible thing. And there are moments when, like, if you're going to make a choice to, to commit to something like that, you have to. You're going to make a choice with a select group of people. I mean, I again, we're not telling anybody what I'm just thinking about certain like, because I do like the concept of honor, but when, like, the Weather Underground did what they were doing, and the people that kept them functioning so that they were capable of doing what they were doing, um, that would have to be a very, because that's not just a belief system at that point in time. It's a code. It's
I get the
yeah, yeah,
code,
yeah,
but that's what I'm saying. I mean, you can have a code of honor. There's a code of respect, and we're probably going too far down the
yeah.
road. But here's another reason that I would argue,
Mhm.
and I understand you're just calling it as a concept and not
It's the
a
standard.
title.
Yeah.
But those guys were East Coast Irish, or at least that's the way that they were supposed to be portrayed,
Hmm.
specifically Boston.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But it's the same in New York. It's the same, down in Jersey, wherever. They say that the Irish don't talk to cops,
Hmm.
and that's kind of the same concept. Even if you're not a criminal, you're the enemy. I mean, you're on the wrong side,
Hmm.
and this probably boils down again to a poor people thing
Hmm.
because black people don't talk to cops.
Hmm.
Asians don't talk to cops. Um, most poor people
Don't
don't
talk
talk
to
to
cops.
cops.
Yeah.
And it's because they've probably had the shit kicked out of
Yeah.
them on numerous occasions, or they're afraid that it will happen.
Yeah. They don't feel like they're there to protect and serve. They're
Right.
there to shake down and to intimidate and to not play, we believe in the rule of law game. It's a different kind of thing. And we're not saying that every cop in the world's a dickhead, right? But we are saying that there are some clear instances where power has been abused, especially in poor contexts. I think that's pretty fair to say. Now, like, at some point, I think we're just arguing over whether or not. I mean, if you want to just say that that's something that's specific to that specific demographic of folks because they had that history and it connects to them. I mean, when I did look at the actual history of the town, like looked at the Charlestown stuff, um, uh, they did actually say a bunch of stuff. They said all the people that are involved in are generally they're Irish Americans, and they tend to not be very wealthy, and this is their way of, and they do not, yeah, like you said, they don't interact with the police in a favorable manner because they've had a horrible history with them.
Well, and it's probably not just the police, it's the administration or the institution, it's the state on probably multiple levels.
Yeah, of course, dude. Of course.
But the police are generally that
Well,
first line of defense.
the primary function in that movie was the FBI. I mean, the FBI is tied to the. I mean, they have a relationship with Boston PD, but I mean, I guess maybe I should have not said it like that. But either way.
Well, and he didn't. I mean, dude, he let that one cop walk because
That was an awesome scene, actually. If you want, I do
yeah,
like that scene when he just rolls up. They're all standing in there in their fucking nun outfits. He looks at them. They look at him.
and he just looks away.
Yep. Fucking. I mean, but I mean, like that's an important scene, because it makes a huge fucking comment about, and that's not a comment about. It's a complicated comment. It might be a comment about Irish Americans. It might be a comment about people that come from the same neighborhood, that have suffered the same kind of background.
It could just be a comment about some dude that didn't want to get shot. And I don't think that that's what they were saying in the movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, you have to look at that too, because I don't think they saw his badge. They didn't know whether or not he was Irish. Maybe they did know him. I don't fucking know. But
I'm just elaborating on a
clearly,
number of different
yeah,
things to where he made they both, the important thing, no matter what the intention was coming from, was that they all made a conscious choice. The cop and the criminals.
yeah. I thought that it was awesome, but I like the movie. Most movies I like have a similarity to it. I mean,
Really?
it's a genre. It's either fucking seriously probably stupid comedies, but comedies in general, whether they be fucking smart highbrow shit or slapstick type stuff, and these type of movies, Scorsese, Tarantino, fucking Guy Ritchie, De Palma.
Walking fine legal lines, things like vigilantism, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I didn't even get into the whole fucking like, you know, the Dark Knight Rises and shit like that, even though that would be vigilantism. But
Would it really?
but the superheroes, I mean, I like most of those too. But it's kind of the same thing. Kind of saying, "Hey, fuck you."
But Batman's, well, yeah, maybe we'll go back down that. Let's get back to Banks, bitch.
Okay. Um. So I don't know. I mentioned Bonnie and Clyde when I was talking about the love thing. And those two really were in love, or she fucking faked it really well. I watched that movie and I was really surprised because fucking Gene Wilder was in it, which, I mean, he didn't have a long time in the movie, but he played like an undertaker that they kidnapped, which they really did kidnap people. And generally speaking, they would let them go and even give them money so that they would get back home or could get back home. So Gene Wilder played one of the kidnapped victims. Gene Hackman played his brother Buck. So I was really surprised at who was in the movie. But again, for a bank robbery movie, there wasn't as much gratuitous violence as I would have liked.
Well, like, and you would suggest it. It's older. What, 67?
67, yeah. Yeah. So it was good though. I mean, and they did like this montage where they had a whole bunch of robberies happening and they had this music playing in the background and they'd show one robbery and one robbery and one robbery. Um I wasn't a huge fan of that because I think that they could have stretched it out a little more or played it toward the end where the fucking the Texas Rangers and the fucking guys from Louisiana and a couple of feds, pinned him in and fucking shot him down because by then his brother was already dead and his brother's wife was in jail. Um, they definitely could have done it another way. That montage and the lack of, but again, it was 67, so maybe gunshot wounds and shit weren't as easy to do back then.
I think that would be fair to say. I don't remember seeing an awful lot of. I mean, like seriously, like when did Night of the Living Dead come out? I mean, that's 50s, but that was like baloney and fucking,
Right. But a lot of the stuff had to do with like the rating association. I mean, when we're talking about those older movies, like, they couldn't show this because
that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So
it was a different time.
But the blood thing is part of that too.
Well, that means that if you're going to watch a movie from 67, you're watching it for the sake of the story, generally speaking.
Yeah, but I already knew the story. I just wanted to check the movie out to see how it was.
I just
and
meant
then
in general when you watch it. I didn't mean you.
Yeah.
I meant people that watch movies from back then were not watching them so that they could see somebody's fucking leg get blown off or whatever.
Right. Or well, because like when I was doing my Bonnie and Clyde research, because I knew a little bit about Bonnie and Clyde, but I didn't know a whole lot. Like I didn't know that she wrote a poem while she was in jail, and that's the poem that like I think Beyonce used for her song. That was what they based it because it was called. I can't remember. Anyway, she was a writer. She wrote this poem while she was in jail, and it apparently fucking told the story of how they ended up dying. But But when I was doing the research, they talked about Buck getting shot, and they said that his head had a hole in it, and you could see like brain matter and shit. And he was still alive. He didn't die until like 3 days later. But when they showed Gene Hackman getting shot, I mean, he just had a little bit of blood on his forehead and like a fucking band-aid. Which is, I think they could have probably found a happy medium between showing a huge gaping hole and brain matter and then a band-aid.
I really think that you're like complaining about something that is so out of context for the time period in that moment, dude. Like no, there was just nothing. There was nothing with regards to gore and
You
film
know
in that
what they
thing.
did have? O Muerta.
Sure they did. Sure they did. At least until they got shot in the head and then they had a band-aid on it. So
That car's still in Vegas.
the one where it happened from?
Bonnie and Clyde's car.
Okay. Where?
I think now it's moved to the crime museum, but it was at one of the casinos for a really long time, dude. Somebody bought it and paid a lot of fucking money for it.
Yeah. That, you would do that if you hit Powerball.
I doubt it. Maybe.
You like to look at things more than just own them.
I don't necessarily, yeah, I like to learn and know.
You like to go to graves.
I don't necessarily like to have. And, well, there's a lot going on with the reasons I don't want to have. A lot of it is because I'm fucking lazy, and if I move, I have to move all of the shit that I have. But we can get into my psychology later.
I think it pretty much is on your fucking sleeve most of the time.
So,
Don't think there's a whole lot to at least dig out of some of that stuff at least. So.
you know, though, it's weird because I'm looking at the list of the rest of my stuff on here, and so the heist with Gene Hackman and Danny DeVito, there ends up being this love interest that kind of fucks Gene Hackman, but he ends up getting revenge because they stole all of this fucking gold and whatever. So that's kind of different from the Hollywood perspective because it's not the happily ever after, and not that in the town it was happily ever after because Ben Affleck went off on his own, but
it definitely wasn't happily ever. I mean, he
She
survived.
didn't fuck him, not in the way that like she didn't rat somebody out or double cross him or anything like that. And then the heist, she fucking double crosses Gene Hackman, gets most of his fucking crew killed, and
like through the law
no,
enforcement or
through like this other gangster
Oh
guy.
wow! So pit somebody else against them. You know, we were talking about some. And I know this is another one of your favorites, but in Heat, um, what's her name? Val
Judd.
Kilmer's. Yeah, Judd. Ashley Judd. Is that okay? Yeah, Val Kilmer's wife. She does a really cool thing for Val Kilmer at the end
That's
of that
awesome,
movie.
dude.
Yeah.
I love that fucking scene. Just that little fucking finger wiggle, dude.
Yeah, I mean, she literally they have a sign, you know, and Val Kilmer does not come up, and he does not get busted, and he gets out of there.
And he's the only one that
Yeah,
gets
everybody else.
away. And I don't really want to ruin the movie for everybody.
It's too late. If you haven't seen it yet, motherfuckers, it's free on YouTube too.
You
So,
should go back and watch it. But that movie, I'm pretty sure they based on, at least in part, in a real bank robbery that happened in downtown LA. Because in downtown LA, they went and they had all of this fucking like armor on. And I'm not talking about just a bulletproof vest. I'm talking about like fucking armor. Like, I can't remember. I think they fucking cut radiators in half or some shit. But they went with fully automatic weapons and robbed a bank in downtown LA. And there was a huge fucking shootout between the cops and these guys that were robbing the bank, which is essentially what happened in Heat after they, well, were about to rob that ore place. And they robbed those bonds from that guy and tried to sell them back, but ended up killing him. And it's a good fucking movie. There's a lot of killing, a lot of double crossing, a lot of
There's some
shit.
twists. It's a long fucking movie. I mean, my favorite scene is like I told you. I like when De Niro and him are in the coffee shop. Pacino pulls him over and says, "Let me buy you a cup of coffee." So they go and they have their cup of coffee, and like it's funny because Pacino's giving him shit. Don't you want a normal life? And then De Niro's like, "So, do you have a normal life?" And he's like, "Well, see, I've had 3 wives, and my current wife's about to get rid of me. Turns out that his fucking daughter, who's Natalie Portman, ends up trying to kill herself because her dad's so fucked up, and because she's just lost. And I think that while Pacino represents something for her, it's not. So Pacino is not having any sort of normal life, so he's kind of a fucking hypocrite. So it turns out that the only thing that they both can identify that's meaningful to either one of them is their job. I'm a robber. I'm not going to change. I'm a fucking cop that likes to chase the biggest robber, and I'm not going to fucking change.
I don't care if you fuck my wife, but you're not gonna watch my TV.
I forgot about that scene. That's funny. That is how that plays out.
Well, it kind of fucking illustrates what you were talking about. He's not going to change. He is a cop, and he keeps these weird hours, and his wife ends up banging somebody else, and he gets mad when he finds out. Not because they were having sex, but because dude was watching his TV.
But the fact that again, like that's that reflective disposition between the criminal and the crime stopper.
Well, and I think you may be forgetting a really important part when you're talking about that reflection, and that is that, and of course you have to have a huge network or at least valuable information in order to make this occur. But De Niro found out who the cops were that were watching him. And so he decided, I'm going to watch them. And he put tails on them and he planted false information. And they showed up and they're in the middle of this fucking thing trying to figure out what they're going to rob next. And he's like, well, they've got, very little cash. And these guys over here have nothing. And over here. And Pacino figured it out. He said, you know what this is? And they're like, what? And he goes, well, we're the ones being watched now. And De Niro and I think Val Kilmer were up on that fucking tower taking pictures of him and everything else, so that they could figure out more about the cops that were chasing him. And that guy, John Voight, said, this guy's fucked up. He's gone through all of these wives,
So what am I forgetting?
He's got high blood pressure. Well, just
details? I mean, I don't
no. You're just because I think when they're sitting at the booth, there's that reflective thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about a cop chasing a criminal, that's one thing. When you think about a criminal chasing a cop, it's something entirely different.
No, I think that actually demonstrates exactly what I'm trying to say, dude. Exactly what I'm trying to say.
Then why didn't you fucking say it?
Because I don't need to fucking spell it out like that, dude. When I sit there and I say that you have these spaces where the thing becomes the other thing, right? Then it's implicit, right? In what it is that's happening, right? Especially like when you universalize it to a gigantic level, like where you have big banks that are fucking ripping people off. Because in those instances, you're not the separation between the criminal and the crime stopper is merged, right? So like when Goldman Sachs comes out and says, after all the shit that they did that they talk about in my favorite bank robbing film, which is,
I don't know, is it called The Big Short?
It might be called The Big Short, right? I mean, because remember when we were talking about earlier in the week, the point isn't just to talk, it's to understand that this is about banks robbing banks, and that there is something that's happening to where the criminal becomes the liberator on some level, and the liberator becomes the criminal, right? So like one of the douchebags that was the head of fucking Goldman Sachs is standing up in fucking front of they're sitting in front of Congress. You know, they go through all of them like it was 2009, 2010 or something like that. And they asked one of the vice presidents. It wasn't the main guy, but I can't remember the name right off the top of my head. But they're talking to him, and he says, "So you were selling these CDOs, these synthetic CDOs that you knew were preparing to default in one space, right? And then you were buying um, these futures that suggested that the housing market was about to fall on its fucking face at the same time." And they asked him, don't you think that that's like a conflict of interest, at least if it's not a crime? And the motherfucker said, "This is capitalism, you know?" And that's some fucking bullshit, because at that point in time, you're literally rigging the game, you know? And I mean, it's bad enough that you're selling a product to somebody that you know is a piece of shit, you know? I mean, and go see The Big Short. I'm not going to go through what a synthetic CDO is and all that kind of stuff, but it's important to at least think about it and understand at some point, so that maybe somewhere down the line we don't keep getting ass fucked by these various institutions.
So maybe this is why I'm more of a pleb than you are. But so, oh, sorry, I thought you had stopped.
I was very close.
That was a long pause.
Well, I'm thinking it through sometimes as I go, right? But at that moment, he literally is identifying himself as both the law and the criminal, because they're the ones that are setting the rules of the game, and then they're the ones that are fucking people over. And we literally have nowhere to go except for back to them, because ultimately, between them and all the other majors, there are no other financial institutions in the world. You know, we are pretty much fucking screwed and railroaded.
Thousands, nay millions.
Yeah, we could thousands, nay millions. He's going to try to work in a nay, I think, every time now. So I'm sorry. Go ahead now.
No. I was trying to get back, because I know you really want to talk about The Big Short, and we can.
Well, I mean, I just.
But I wanted to stick with the reflective thing, because I think, and don't get me wrong, I like dialogue in a movie, but I think this might make me more of a pleb than you, because, like, at the time when they're in the diner looking at each other, shooting the breeze, and it's a real tense shooting the breeze, but they're drinking coffee and essentially telling each other to fuck off. You know, De Niro says, "You're gonna have to fucking kill me."
That's where it resolves to.
Right. Yeah. But I enjoy that scene. But the reason I mentioned the fucking scene where De Niro was watching them is because at that point they had turned the tables on him, and I know it was just a fucking illustration of them turning the tables on him, but I like that idea better than seeing myself in a mirror.
But I don't know that seeing it that way gets you as far as you need to go if you want to understand how to fight a war against somebody like that. I'm sorry, and maybe that does make you more of a pleb than me.
I am more of a pleb,
because when I say the things that I'm saying right now, I mean, it's right out of Marx, it's right out of Hegel. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But at some point in time, when we're talking about the way that we want to sort of like correct the system that's really struggling right now, right? Or at least meditate on how to get that done, or talk to other people about, you know, how to find ways to get that done, and think about it, think it through, you know, like it can't always just be about these cathartic spaces where I do these things that make me feel good, you know. I mean, we have to there's real concrete strategic questions that have to stem further than just turning the tables on. And that's great. It's great that they did that. That's wonderful, you know, but where did it get them in the end?
No, I understand what you're saying, but I thought we were talking about the movie. You said my favorite scene is this one, and you told me why, so I told you in the same movie why that was my favorite scene.
Talking shit why I think you've seen sex in
that moment. Yeah, I got that.
But I do really like the other scene that you like, where she does the little finger thing on the handrail, right? I just like
That's
it when they're
great.
standing across. That was a weird scene. I mean, that was a fucking odd scene. Like turning the tables is a scene that you see sometimes, maybe not as cleverly as it was in Heat. I mean, that was really a long sort of drawn out where they end up get to that point,
Yeah.
But which is what I mean. To be honest, like for a 3 hour movie, I mean, it doesn't feel like a 3 hour movie. It's a pretty good 3 hour movie.
And there was a lot. There was a lot going on.
Like
And
Schindler's List, that feels like a 3 hour movie.
there was some of it that they probably could have fucking cut. Like, you know, of course it was kind of important. Like Danny Trejo can't shake his fucking tail. So they end up hooking up with this fucking black dude that
But
had
he's
just
lying.
got paroled.
He's lying, right? Danny Trejo in that scene.
No, he couldn't shake his tail.
But
And
they
then
took him in though, right?
no, he ends up fucking getting killed because that guy, the crazy fucking guy from the bank robbery that fucking fucked everything up with the armored truck to begin with,
Uh-huh.
ended up torturing him, trying to figure out where the fuck everybody
Oh,
is.
that was okay. I forgot about that. Okay, I'm sorry. I when I was watching it the other day, I was doing a lot of things at the same time.
And so Trejo, the tail that he couldn't shake was the cops. But then that other dude ended up finding him and fucking torturing him. And so De Niro puts him down.
I'm glad De Niro killed that guy, though. I mean,
Trejo?
No, De Niro killed the other guy.
Right, but see, that's another thing, dude.
Yeah.
That's the love part. Okay, so there's the Judd part with Val Kilmer, and those two are in this weird "I hate you, I love you" thing. But
she's Bonnie. I mean, she does the Bonnie thing.
she loves him enough to not fucking take him down, even though there's an entire room full of cops behind him.
Yeah, she's a straight criminal. She does the straight criminal thing.
Yeah. De Niro, on the other hand, I think is a fucking retard, dude. Like seriously, Val Kilmer got away, and he shouldn't. Maybe he shouldn't have gone to meet Ashley Judd, because if she wasn't cool, he would have been done. De Niro has fucking cops on his tail. Everybody's fucking trying to get him. It's a fucked situation, and in order to get revenge, he goes to this hotel where he knows this guy is to kill him, and leaves the girl he's in love with in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I talked about it before we started recording. Why couldn't you just wait 2 weeks?
Especially when, like, so when he's at the coffee shop with him, and he says, "I got a girlfriend now," like, and in the beginning, like, he finally has the moment where he realizes that he wants to have a human relationship, right? But before that, everything was about that rhetorical bullshit. Uh, you can't have anything connected to you that you can't drop and be gone in 30 seconds. I mean, he says that like 6 times before that, right? So
at least,
yeah. So that was
it's a lot.
Yeah, he loves to. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump, but I bumped. So, but for him to, this is a problem with the writing. I think if he would have made the mistake because he went with the person he loved, that would have been a little bit more like literary, a little bit more poetic. But when he does it to go and get revenge, when none of the discussions prior to that were about revenge.
Well, I think that they were speaking to his arrogance at that point. Is that one, he can fall in love and have the girl, and two, he can get revenge and get away. Because he was an arrogant motherfucker, and for good reason. I mean, they had a fucking solid crew. And I could be wrong. I don't know what they were trying to say.
Why didn't they foreshadow revenge a little bit? I mean, I like a film that like drives me in a certain direction or drives me in different directions.
They didn't have to foreshadow it. I mean, it was there the entire fucking time, dude. Remember? So he tries to sell the bonds back to that one guy.
Yeah.
And that one guy sends fucking Henry Rollins to kill him. I'm a liar.
Henry Rollins for that scene?
I don't know, dude. I think that was because he was in another movie where he played some guy on the highway, and he was in a couple of movies.
But he was his chief security guy. I mean,
yeah. So he sends Well, or he has Henry Rollins send a crew to kill these guys, and it's at the fucking
Yeah, the
drive.
drive-in theater. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Well, they get their revenge on the fucking rich uppity broker guy for trying to do that
Yeah, the
shit. So
Bond
I
guy.
mean, maybe revenge isn't the right word. Maybe what's the word I would look for is equalization. I mean, the fact that you can't do this without
Retribution.
retribution. Yeah. Or some consequence. And so maybe they should have foreshadowed it. I don't know. I
That's the only
fucking
thing
love the
you're
movie.
I'll take that because that is one scene where they definitely exacted like a very clear expression of retribution, and then when they go in and they fucking kill him, I mean they do it twice, so I can take that. That's a fair, at least the concept of consequence. But there's no doubt, like at the end, it's straight self sabotage. I mean, when he goes after that guy, he's fucking killing himself.
Well, but you remember that he tried to kill that guy already, right? Like
When they were taking him outside at first, or
when
what?
they were at the diner and
Yeah.
he
Yes.
fucking opened the trunk and the trunk was full of
And then the
plastic
cop
and he
came
knocked
by.
him
The cop
down
came by.
and that
Yes,
guy
yes,
went,
of course I remember that. I was
yeah,
like, God,
okay.
that's bad luck. That guy deserves a bat.
Yeah, that is bad mojo. But I think the entire thing, and I don't know who directed it, I don't know who wrote it, I don't know if that's even fucking important. I still think it was a brilliant fucking movie.
Michael
And
Mann both wrote and directed
really,
it.
okay, well,
He's had some good movies. Yeah.
um, so I think maybe I could be wrong, is that there was no foreshadowing because the entire idea was that this crew was so ruthless when they needed to be. Because remember, he said as soon as things went bad and this guy got shot, they killed the other two just so that there wouldn't be any witnesses. So they're so fucking
That reminds me of
badass.
Casino. Why take a risk?
They're so badass, so ruthless that this is the crew that you don't want to fuck with, whether you're a cop or a criminal. Just let them do what they're gonna do, and you're not gonna get killed. That probably isn't the right way to say that, but I mean, they were
It
fucking
kind of is though. Yeah.
yeah,
Like stay the fuck out of the way. I mean, that's what he says to Pacino, like straight up when he says, because Pacino says that no matter what, if it's between you and a civilian, I'm coming for you. And then he says, if you back me into a corner, it's the same cost,
yeah.
motherfucker. So
So he was great, but again, they put that love thing in there.
that always is.
It
They
is.
do. I mean, and that's straight Hollywood.
Okay, so here's a different kind of love and maybe revenge. So you and I have talked multiple times about Richie versus Tarantino.
That's a foreshadow, just for the sake of argument.
One of Richie's newer movies is called The Wrath of Man.
I've not seen
And
that one.
of course he has Jason Statham in it.
He loves himself some Jason Statham.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck it is with those two. If they gangbang Madonna at some point, I don't know.
I'm sure
what's
that's
going.
probably what it was. Locked in like a pair of Chinese fucking finger cuffs. You fucking idiot.
I don't know, dude, but so Wrath of Man, Jason Statham is this guy who runs a crew probably similar to De Niro in Heat. Um, this other group of people try to rob an armored car and end up killing his son. So of course he loves his son.
How did his son get killed? He just got caught in a crossfire or something, or
No, some psycho. So this other group of people that end up doing all of these robberies around town, they're fucking all former military, and they're kind of bored now because they got home, and They don't feel like they're being treated right because of everything that they did in Afghanistan. And so a couple of them are doing shit jobs at the mall and whatever. So they decide that they've got an inside track. There's an inside person that's telling them how to rob all of these armored cars. Well, this one armored car that they try to rob, Jason Statham happens to be outside doing some recon because they were planning on robbing it later.
Of course.
Um, well, he's got his son in the car because he figures it's fine. I'm just doing recon.
Yep.
He goes to get a fucking taco. Kid's in the car. Clint Eastwood's son, Scott, ends up pulling the kid out of the car and fucking double tapping him in the chest.
Because he saw what was going on?
Yeah. Well, and because he was kind of a psycho, because he had
Okay.
shot a couple of the drivers, because their whole game, these military guys were,
Clint
you know,
Eastwood's son?
Scott. Yeah, Scott Eastwood.
Really? Okay, I gotcha. Jan, okay.
So that's a different kind of love, and it's not the same thing that's going to fuck up the story in the middle, but a reason to justify revenge,
Yeah,
as
revenge
far as
when it
I'm
comes to your
concerned.
kid. Yeah, that's a fact. That's something that's gotta happen. If anything happened to my kid, I don't know what I'd do, dude.
And it's a pretty good movie. Again, so Statham is the head of this crew, and they've got really good connections. So he comes up with all these fake IDs. I love the way that it's so easy in these movies to come up with fucking fake IDs and passports and whatever. But they come up with this entire background on him, and he goes to get a job for the company that got robbed when his kid got killed. And he like only did about 75% on the fucking shooting test, and he made himself look worse than he was.
Yeah.
But then like his truck gets robbed and he fucking kills everybody, and then they try to rob another truck and he almost kills all of those people, but it turns out it was his crew trying to rob him, so they just quit and fucking ran off because they didn't know what he was doing. It's a cool movie, and Guy Ritchie does a really good job of throwing some twists and turns in there. Not that it's fucking M. Night Shyamalan or whatever, but it's
Shyamalan.
yeah, whatever his fucking name is. His movies fucking suck, but that's just my opinion.
Whatever, dude. You love his movies, man.
Yeah, I do.
Swing away.
The Village.
You know what? He always
I
has good
see
names
dead
for his
people.
characters. H, Bullet, Boy Sweet Dave, Hollow Bob, Agent King.
Dude, I'm fairly sure that he like grew up in like a gangster part of town in London, because he really does have good names for his fucking people. And Rock and Rolla, which well, never mind. I don't want to do the whole Guy Ritchie thing, but there was another Guy Ritchie movie on here, and that's Snatch.
Fucking funny movie, dude. Periwinkle Blue.
So you haven't seen Wrath of Man, so
not.
we can't talk about that a whole lot. I just wanted to, because I was trying to do a segue and be slick about it, and I kind of fucked that up because I forgot that you hadn't seen that movie.
It's alright, dude. Turkish.
But
he fucking has Jason Statham in every fucking movie.
Almost every movie except the fucking Sherlock Holmes ones. Mm-hmm. Oh, and the King Arthur one he did. Statham wasn't in that one. But
did you see that?
I saw the King Arthur one. I did not see the Sherlock Holmes ones. I think I've seen part of one of the Sherlock Holmes, and I don't know which one it was.
Well, and I haven't come back to that when we do our episode comparing and contrasting Quentin Tarantino with Guy Ritchie.
Yeah, I think it's important. So Snatch, they do a diamond. Reservoir Dogs, they do diamonds.
Really nicely polished cut diamonds.
Yeah. And I think because we talked about mediums of exchange in our last couple of episodes, I think that it's important to know that those precious stones are always going to be a medium of exchange. Now in Snatch, it's a different fucking thing because it's like a diamond the size of a fucking fist. It's huge, dude. So I think the only way you could get rid of that is to fucking break it up
Yeah, you
into
gotta cut it
smaller
up. You gotta
stones.
cut it up, yeah.
Unless you just knew some fucking incredibly rich asshole that was willing to pay for it.
But they'd have to hide it from here to eternity.
Right.
So.
Right. So Snatch is one of those where it's not just one robbery, it's kind of several robberies throughout the movie.
Ending up with the fixing of a fight.
Well, sort of. The fixing of the fight was it happened a couple of different times. Because he was supposed to throw the fight and he didn't throw the fight. He was supposed to throw the fight and didn't. And finally at the end, he didn't do it again, but he had all his Jippo people out in the fucking parking lot and he killed Bricktop and everybody else.
Fucking Bricktop, man. Bricktop and his pigs, man. Woo. Some dark ass shit in that fucking movie, man.
You have to pull the teeth for the sake of the piggy's digestion.
It's so loaded too, dude. There's so many fucking movie in this. The people in this movie. It's fucking hilarious, dude.
Dude, it is, I think, one of my favorite movies of all time.
There's little doubt that it is Brad Pitt's best role. By far and above.
I still like him in True Romance.
Yeah, the Honey Bear. You know, oddly enough, you've referred to it on this show like 3 or 4 times, but I always forget the Honey Bear.
And you always say it's his best role, but dude, Fight Club, he was fucking really good. And I know we're talking about a couple of different things, but
well, when I bring it up, I'm asking for it. But dude, when that accent is so, that is just such a unique, like, incredible. What'd you say?
It's not Irish, and it's not English.
What did you say? Periwinkle blue. What did you say?
You like Dags?
Yeah, Dags.
What? Dags.
Dags.
Oh, dogs. Yes, I like dogs.
Because they give him a dog with the.
And that's the same dog that snatched the fucking diamond.
That is the diamond snatching dog. He's a fucking brilliant writer, dude. He really is a very brilliant writer. Pretty decent.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and the first movie I ever saw was Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I don't know if that was his first movie or not, but I didn't mention that on this show, and I know I'm mentioning it now, but there is
you fucked it all up.
There is robbery in that movie. It's just not a bank or anything else. I mean, they're stealing drugs and money from drug dealers to pay off other crooks. So he's, again, I don't know for sure. Maybe he's just got a really fucking vivid imagination, but he is definitely familiar with crime, or at least crime as it relates to London.
It is his first full feature film in '98. He did a music video before that, and he did a short called The Hard Case. But Lock, Stock is his first full feature film. Snatch was his second. I mean, like that's why you got to compare him to Tarantino, because those motherfuckers just hit the ground running, you know.
Yeah.
Although I think that Guy Ritchie's kept it up a little bit better than Tarantino. But again, I digress. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that could have just been, well, something.
And when we're gonna skip Aladdin in the Guy Ritchie movies.
But that was that Aladdin weird live thing, right? With Will Smith.
It was Disney. It was a Disney movie.
No, I know.
It had Will Smith.
Yeah, it was some sort of weird fucking like. half cartoon, half live thing.
Yeah. They just put a bunch of CGI shit on it.
Yeah, I skipped that too. I mean, and I might go back and watch the Sherlock Holmes, but there's no fucking way
Robert
I'm gonna
Downey
watch
Jr.
the.
does really good in those movies. Those movies are definitely worth watching. Both Jeannie, I think, always tells me she hates them, but
The Sherlock Holmes or the Aladdin?
the Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted because anyway. Okay, so we've still got a bunch of fucking movies and shit to talk about. Like one of my favorite movies as far as crime goes that is fairly recent, and it's not all that recent, is called Hell or High Water. It was done in 2016. I want to talk about The Highwayman because that one is fairly recent, and that has to do with the cops that were chasing down Bonnie and Clyde.
We're gonna have to talk about Point Break at least a little bit. We got to talk about In Time at least a little bit.
Yeah,
is an important one because it's totally off the beaten path from what we're talking about, but it's definitely a bank robbery movie in a fucking weird universe.
Absolutely, and there's a bunch of shit we definitely need to talk about, but we're coming up on an hour and 11, so I figured before we started talking about another movie and going on and on, we probably should break unless.
No, I need to relieve myself.
All right. We're going to take a break, and we will be back in the second half for some other shit.
Yeah, and we'll tell you what we're going to do next time, too, at the end.
All right.
Later.